What is up, my friend? Welcome back to the basement. I am Mikey Henninger. This is Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. Thank you so much for tuning into the best fantasy football podcast, the best fantasy football show in Franklin, Wisconsin. I am recording this bad boy at 2:46 a.m., hoping I don't wake the wife and kids. They have school tomorrow. I'm taking the day off. I am recording this thing at 2:45 in the morning after spending 16 plus hours putting together my Week 9 fantasy football heat map, which is a resource that 250 plus people use every single week when they're making difficult start-sit decisions, when they're setting DFS lineups, when they're making player prop bets. It takes me about 16 to 24, depending on how many games and all different kinds of data, but it takes me a long time. And I spent 16 plus hours on it today, and yes, at 2:30 in the morning, I cracked open a beer, a Centennial from Enlightened Brewery, which, by the way, this is not a paid advertisement, but wanted to share with you that this is my first time ever having this beer. Didn't notice until right now that it says Easy Grapefruit Centennial, so I was terrified because I don't like grapefruit. I really don't like fruity beers to begin with. Thankfully, can't taste grapefruit, can't taste anything fruity, and this beer is delicious. It's a single hop pale ale. Everything that Enlightened Brewery touches turns to gold, so if you're ever up in Milwaukee, let me know. Shoot me a message on Twitter, and I got to get you over to Enlightened Brewery. And again, this is not a paid advertisement. I just really love their beer. Anyways, you're not here for that, especially because wherever you're listening, you probably can't even get Enlightened Brewery. You're here for fantasy football. This is episode 19 of the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football Podcast. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Figure if I'm going to spend 16 to 24 hours, digging into this heat map and creating this resource, I might as well flip on the microphone and talk about some of the things that I find. Candidly, this is my second time trying to record this episode because the first time I tried to go into every single game and talk about several of the different players in all the games, and I looked up at the clock and realized I was 32 minutes into the episode and only on the fourth game of the week. So, this is my second time recording this, and we're actually only going to dig into a few games. And what I'm not going to try and do is tell you, you should start Josh Allen, you should start Tyreek Hill. Well, actually, Tyreek Hill's on the list, but that's for a different reason. But I'm going to try and focus today on names that are a little less obvious, for lack of a better term. If you are listening on podcast, know that I also put this episode up on YouTube, as I do with all my episodes. And on YouTube, I am also sharing my computer screen. We're going to actually be using and going through this heat map together so you can see how it works. So if you want to, please feel free to press pause on the podcast and head over to finish the episode on YouTube so that you can follow along and see everything. Although I will do my best to talk through it so you don't need a visual aid, but it always helps. And plus, this thing is pretty. It looks nice, if I do say so myself. And I can say so myself because I didn't color it. I'm not the one who designed what it looks like. Shout out to my friend Alicia on that one. But without further ado, let's dive in to episode 19, where we're going to talk about some of the games on the Week 9 slate. There are 26 teams in action. There's 13 games on the Week 9 slate. We're going to talk about a couple of them. We're going to talk about a couple players that I like, a couple players that stand out. And again, I'm going to do my best to stay away from saying things like, start Cooper Kupp this week, because duh. So, let's start out with the Dolphins-Bears game. Again, if you're on YouTube, then you're seeing over on the left side all of the games and all of the information that goes along with the game. So, game number 2 on the heat map is the Dolphins-Bears. The over-under on this thing is 45.5. Now, typically, just a quick caveat here to try and help explain how it works. A lot of times when I'm setting fantasy football lineups or DFS lineups or looking at player prop bets, the over-under is important to understand what types of games we should expect a lot of points from. What's going to be a shootout, which games are going to feature a lot of points, because generally in fantasy football you want touchdowns, right? So the heat map, of course, is color coordinated, so you can easily see by the red and green shading which games are in the upper half versus which games are in the bottom half of scoring or expected scoring. Now, the Dolphins-Bears game is a 45.5 over-under. That's in the lower half of the 13-game slate here in Week 9. The Dolphins, in particular, are in the upper half. They are expected to score 25.25 or so points, and the Bears are expected to score just 20.25s, which is pretty deep in the lower half of the 26 teams that are in action. The spread on the game is the Dolphins by 5, which is healthy, but not out of control in a way that should crazily alter the game or how teams approach the game. My favorite plays here are, again, I told you I'm not going to dive into the obvious ones, but I do want to talk about Tyreek Hill really, really quickly because there is some fascinating stuff, for lack of a better term, that's coming down the line for Tyreek Hill. Now, here's what we know about the Miami Dolphins. They are expected to score 25.25 points. That is the 7th most on the 26-team slate. They are, Tyreek Hill himself is, in games he's played with Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill is averaging 21.94 PPR points. Okay, 21.94 PPR points every game he's played with Tua Tagovailoa, but he has only scored 2 touchdowns. So if you think about how insane these numbers could be if the guy also had touchdowns, he has 986 scrimmage yards on the season, but he only has 2 touchdowns on the season. That puts him at the very, very, very top of my positive touchdown regression list. This is another cheat sheet that I put together for my 250 plus subscribers. The long story cut super short here is that it's a mathematical cheat sheet where it makes it really easy for you to identify mathematically which players are more likely to score touchdowns versus which players are not very likely to score touchdowns in the upcoming week. Tyreek Hill is at the very, very, very top of that list. He's got 986 scrimmage yards, but only 2 touchdowns, where on average he should have closer to 5 touchdowns. So he's way behind, and positive touchdown regression shouldn't be far behind. He should be finding the end zone pretty much any minute now. Now, on top of that, to make things even a little bit more interesting, the Chicago Bears are also on that touchdown regression list when it comes to defending wide receivers. So something I do that's a little bit different than anything else that you'll find out there is I put together a defensive touchdown regression cheat sheet. So you'll be able to see, or you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, that the Chicago Bears, when it comes to wide receivers, they've allowed 1,009 scrimmage yards to wide receivers, but they've only allowed 4 touchdowns when on average teams have allowed 6.3 touchdowns by this point. So they're a little bit behind and quote-unquote due to allow touchdowns to wide receivers. So now you have Tyreek Hill, who's at the very top of the touchdown regression list, and you have the Chicago Bears, who are expected to allow more touchdowns sooner rather than later. And, you know, it's not like you were going to be sitting Tyreek Hill anyway, but in DFS, for example, I am not going to enter a single tournament lineup that does not have Tyreek Hill in it, even if he is super expensive. Okay, now, a little bit less obvious, but still kind of obvious, is Raheem Mostert on the Dolphins side. So the Dolphins are expected to win by 5 points, and typically when you're somewhat heavily favored, that implies that there's going to be plenty of volume for the running back as the winning team looks to keep the clock moving and salt the clock away. Raheem Mostert, over his last 5 games, he's averaging 12.7 PPR points, 17.2 touches, 2.8 targets, 1.8 catches, 85.4 yards, and he has 2 touchdowns. Now, Raheem Mostert has been relatively hit or miss in those 5 contests. He has 2 low games between 5 and 8 PPR points, 1 slightly better game of 10.1 PPR points, but he also has 2 high games between 19 and 21 PPR points. Now, we know that the Dolphins traded away Chase Edmonds, but then they also traded for another 49ers buddy for Mike McDaniel, which is Jeff Wilson. But it's really unlikely that Jeff Wilson makes a Week 9 impact. Now, next week might be a different story, but In Week 9, it should be Raheem Mostert's backfield basically all to himself. This is another good week to tee him up as a RB2. Again, he's a favored running back, which implies volume. He's on a team that's expected to score the 7th most points on the slate, which implies some scoring chances. And to top it all off, he's going against a soft Bears defense. He has a really good matchup. The Bears have been a friendly foe for running backs. They are holding running backs to the 11th fewest catches and the 15th fewest receiving yards. But other than that, they are allowing the 7th most PPR points per game, the 5th most touches, the 5th most rushing yards, the 3rd most scrimmage yards, and the 5th most touchdowns. Six running backs in the last 7 games have been able to produce 18 or more fantasy points against the Bears. 4 of those have hit 23, 2 of which got up past 32, including Tony Pollard's 33.7 PPR points last week, which is the season high against Chicago currently, and they're getting burned by running backs. So it's another good spot for Raheem Mostert. It might not be for, forever or for the foreseeable future, but this is another good spot to tee up Raheem Mostert. All right, let's jump down to the Chargers-Falcons game. Now, on the heat map, this is game number 6. The over-under here is 49.5, which is tied for the highest on the Week 9 slate, on the 26-team, 13-game slate. It's tied for the highest. Now, that implies a little bit of shootout potential there. It implies that this might be a game that we want to target in fantasy football, right? Because we know that points are going to be scored. The Chargers in particular are expected to score 26.25 points. Now, pretty high on my list this week is Josh Palmer. Here's what we know about the Chargers. They are expected to score 26.25 points, which is the 5th most on the 26-team slate. They are expected to win by 3 on the road over the Atlanta Falcons. We know that Mike Williams and now it also sounds like Keenan Allen are going to both miss this contest. So suddenly this is shaping up as a really, really heavy volume game for Austin Ekeler, business as usual. Gerald Everett should get a nice boost in targets, but also Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer suddenly is the de facto wide receiver 1 in LA. He's suddenly the wide receiver 1 catching passes from Justin Herbert. And we know that, the 49.5 point over-under, that's tied for the highest on the 13-game slate, and this looks like a contest to target in fantasy football. So why would you not want the wide receiver 1 on a team that's quarterbacked by Justin Herbert? Now, Palmer has already played 6 games with Mike Williams, and in those games, he already produced respectable numbers: 9.33 PPR points, 6.67 targets, 4.3 catches, 40 yards, and he had 1 touchdown. He did have 3 low games between 3 to 6 PPR points, but he also had 3 really high games not really high, but 3 strong games between 13 and 16 PPR points. Now, Mike Williams was averaging 8.4 targets per game. Theoretically, those need to find a new home. Keenan Allen is also going to miss week 9. So all of this is forcing Josh Palmer into that, Chargers wide receiver 1 role. And he's all of a sudden in fantasy football, he's a top 24 option, and he's got big upside on a team that's expected to score a lot of points. And to top it all off, my friend, Josh Palmer has a best possible matchup against a league worst defense. If you see over here on the heat map, and again, sorry if you're on podcast listening into this, but the number 1 under the wide receiver column for the Falcons indicates that they are giving up the most PPR points per game to wide receivers. So this is a best possible matchup with a league worst Falcons defense. Listen to this. The Falcons are allowing 2 wide receivers. They are allowing the most PPR points, the most catches, the most yards. Actually, let's talk about the actual numbers. They're allowing 46.34 PPR points per game, which is the most. They're allowing 16 catches per game, which is the most. They are allowing 215 receiving yards to wide receivers every game, which is the most. And they're allowing the second most touchdowns at 1.5 touchdowns per game. The Atlanta Falcons have allowed a whopping 11 different wide receivers to hit 15 or more PPR points against them in just 8 games. Let me say that again. They have played 8 games, and 11 different wide receivers have been able to hit 15 or more PPR points. 6 of those wide receivers have been able to hit 20 PPR points, including 4 in the last 3 games that have hit 27 or more PPR points. Josh Palmer is checking each and every imaginable box this week, and then to top it off, he gets a best possible matchup. So there's a lot of reason to like Josh Palmer. I went through my leagues and I picked him up in as many of my 22 leagues as I possibly could. I also sent out an alert, which is to all 250 plus of my subscribers. That's another part of the package that they get, is a real-time live notifications when I have recommendations that go straight to their phone. So it shows up as an alert in their phone. But I sent them all an alert that said, go pick up Josh Palmer in as many leagues as you can. We'll figure out if you want to start him later, but just get him on your roster. It's a great spot to have and start Josh Palmer this week. By the way, same goes for Gerald Everett. For the sake of time, we won't dig into everything that we just did, but he too has a very good matchup and should have a ton of volume in this game. He's a great tight end to start this week. Austin Ekeler should be business as usual. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen being out might actually even add more to Austin Eckler's plate. All right, we're going to hop down to the Raiders and Jaguars. Personally, this is one of my favorite games on the Week 9 slate. I'm going to have several DFS tournament entries featuring both of these two teams. The 2 players that I wanted to highlight here are not the obvious ones, right? It's Etienne season. Get Travis Etienne in as many lineups as you can. It's Josh Jacobs season. Get Josh Jacobs in as many lineups as you can. But I want to talk about Trevor Lawrence to start with. Trevor Lawrence is hopping over here to another tab that's on this heat map. All 250 plus of my subscribers have access to my weekly streamers. It's another cheat sheet that's going to show defenses that you can stream, kickers that you can stream, tight ends that you can stream, and of course, Gerald Everett is on that list, and then quarterbacks that you can stream. And Trevor Lawrence is by far my favorite on the streamer list this week. Here's what we know. The Jaguars are expected to score 23.25 points, which is, depending on if you're the, glass half empty or glass half full type, it's either the 13th most on the 26 team slate or it's the 13th fewest on the 26 team slate. I'll let you choose if you want to be an optimistic or a pessimistic person. I'm an optimistic person, so I'm going to say it's the 13th most expected points on the 26 team slate. They are expected to they're expected to lose this game by 1.5 points to the Raiders, who just pooped the bed a week ago. The game has a 48-point over-under. That's tied for the 4th highest on the 13-game slate. And with both teams having implied totals inside the top 13, again, I'm being on the optimistic side, but both the Raiders and the Jaguars have top 13 implied totals. This absolutely looks like a game to target in Week 9 fantasy football. And again, I intend to have several DFS tournament stacks featuring both these teams. Now, talking specifically about Trevor Lawrence, after 8 games, he's averaging 16.2 PPR points, 230 passing yards, 12.4 rushing yards. He has 10 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and he's also added 3 rushing touchdowns with his legs. He has 18 or more fantasy points in 4 of 8 games this season, so half of his games he's getting at least 18 fantasy points. Now, he is a high-end quarterback too, but he has mouth-watering streamer appeal this week because he has it looks like it could be a shootout, and B, it's a best possible matchup, again, just like, Josh Palmer against the Falcons. Trevor Lawrence has a best possible matchup with a league worst Raiders defense that's allowing, they're getting demolished. They're getting absolutely destroyed by opposing quarterbacks, allowing the most fantasy points per game at 22.3. Ninth most passing yards at about 269. Nice. The second most touchdowns at 2.1 per game. All 7 quarterbacks that have faced the Raiders this season have been able to score at least 17 or more fantasy points against them. And that includes 4 different quarterbacks that have hit 20 fantasy points, and one of which has even hit 30. Now, sure, a lot of that came at the hands and legs of Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, but it also came at the hands and legs of guys like Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson, Davis Mills, and Andy Dalton. Those guys are also responsible, and those guys have also hit at least 17 fantasy points against the Raiders. So every single quarterback to face the Raiders this year has hit at least 17 fantasy points. This could be a shootout. I like this spot for Trevor Lawrence. I think this is a good spot to stream him in shallower leagues where he's available. The other name on the Jaguars that I wanted to talk about was Evan Engram. Now, Evan Engram in particular, he's been balling over his last 4 games. He's averaging 12 PPR points per game, 7.25 targets, 4.75 catches, 57.75 yards, and he has 1 touchdown in the last 4 games. He's hit 9 PPR points or more in each of the last 4 games, including outings of 10.7, 12.9, and 15.5, which was just last week. He is a tight end 2, but he's starting to near tight end 1 status, and this week he should be treated as a tight end 1, and he's a great streamer if he's available in your league. Again, it's going to be a shootout against a bad Raiders defense. They are holding tight ends to the 16th fewest yards at 48.6 per game, but they're also allowing the 12th most catches at 15 per game, and more importantly than anything, especially when it comes to tight ends, they are allowing the most touchdowns to tight ends in football at 0.9 per game, almost 1 every single game. 4 tight ends in 7 games against the Raiders have been able to splash 10 or more PPR points on them, including that absolutely ridiculous 33.5 point game that Travis Kelce had back in week 5 where he had 27 yards but 4 touchdowns. Anyway, great week to think about using Evan Engram as a streamer if he's available in your league. Last game I want to talk about for the sake of time, because we're already at 22 minutes. Let's hop into the Titans and Chiefs, Sunday Night Football. Now, quick disclaimer, quick thing I need to say here. I am in no way, shape, or form recommending benching Derrick Henry. You cannot bench Derrick Henry. He is a beast. He's the king. He's King Henry for a reason. He's the big dog. He's going against a Chiefs defense that's given up the 5th most PPR points to running backs this season. However, I am going to simply caution you to temper your expectations a little bit. Here's why. The Chiefs are expected to win this game by 12.5 points. That's a pretty significant spread. That's a wide spread. It's a wide enough spread to suggest a ultra-negative game script that will eventually, at some point, force the Titans into a pass-heavy approach, a pass-heavy game script. Traditionally and historically, that's not a good thing for King Henry because they simply don't use him very much in the passing game. Now, he did have a combined 11 targets in weeks 3 and 4. We're going to want and need to see that, see more of that in this possible blowout so that he doesn't get scripted out of this game. Again, I am in no way recommending or saying it would be foolish to bench him. You cannot bench Derrick Henry. The whole point of what I am saying is because I do want to put one player on your radar if you're in a pinch at running back that you could use some help with this week, and that's Dontrell Hilliard. We've already talked about how the Titans are expected to get blown out of this one. We've already talked a little bit about how they are expected, because they're going to get blown out, that theoretically they should have to embrace a pass-heavy approach at some point as they're trying to catch up to the Chiefs. That could make Dontrell Hilliard a very, very deep, sneaky PPR play, PPR flex play. I think this is, the Chiefs have held opposing running backs to the 6th fewest rushing yards and the 11th fewest touchdowns, which, again, both of those things are notable for Derrick Henry because that's where he butters his bread. So even though the Chiefs have allowed the 5th most PPR points per game, if you dive in a little bit deeper and add some context, where they are strong is against the rush and against letting running backs into the end zone, which is where Derrick Henry butters his bread. All the while, the Chiefs are allowing the most catches, so they're allowing 8.7 running back catches per game, and the most receiving yards at 64 receiving yards per game from running backs. Candidly, this game sets up better for Dontrell Hilliard's skill set than it does Derrick Henry's. That is not the same thing as saying this is going to be a better Dontrell Hilliard game than a Derrick Henry game. Don't get that part twisted. All the point here, guys, is that if you are in a pinch and you're looking for a deep desperation flyer at running back, this is a really, really sneaky spot for Dontrell Hilliard to rack up catches. And again, this is PPR specific. He's much, much, much less appetizing in leagues that don't award points for receptions. Quick bonus item, very, very similar sentiment for Michael Carter, by the way. There's a very strong chance that Michael Carter racks up a ton of catches this week against the Buffalo Bills. By the way, if you like this type of analysis, all 250 plus subscribers are getting a package from me every single week with every one of these heat maps. So if you're looking at this or if you're hearing this on the podcast, I literally do a deep dive and a thorough written analysis of every single player in every single game, every single week. Whoever you want, you just click on their name and read the analysis. 250 plus to 300 players every single week. Okay? So in that package I'm delivering to my subscribers every week. They are getting every single heat map every week. They have access to our member community, which is a Discord channel. That is where we have a lot of active subscribers there dedicated to helping each other win, asking start-sit questions, asking, should I do this trade? Should I not do this trade? Everybody's become good friends in there. It's really a lot of fun seeing that community interact with one another. So they have access to that. They get live recommendations sent to their phone. So if you're out and about doing your business, you're at the grocery store picking up some buffalo wings, you're going to get a notification from me if something happens and I need to recommend, hey, go pick up Josh Palmer, or Gus Edwards is out, go pick up Kenyon Drake. All of that comes right to your phone, so you know exactly what to do in live real time. Point being, you want to be able to beat your competition, beat your league mates when breaking news happens. Inside that Discord channel, there is also a Ask Me Anything sessions every Monday and Friday. So if you have specific questions that you want to bring or specific questions you want for answering, should I do this trade? Who should I start? You just come to the Monday, Friday Ask Me Anything questions, and I help out as much as I possibly can. They are getting that weekly touchdown regression cheat sheet. I put that together every single week for them. They are getting the weekly streamer cheat sheet. Just, I'm in a pinch. I need to stream a defense, quarterback, tight end, or kicker. And they are getting weekly rankings every single week. So to recap, every single week, all 250 plus of my subscribers get every single heat map, access to our Discord community, live recommendations sent to their phone, Monday and Friday Ask Me Anything sessions, weekly touchdown regression cheat sheets, weekly streamer cheat sheets, weekly rankings, which was 7 different things that I just listed, and it costs about 1 beer per month. Per month. That's it. $5.69 per month, and all of that is delivered to you every single week. Something to consider. Whenever you're ready, I'm ready, we're ready. We'd love to have you. All right, that's a wrap for today's show. I will be back on Tuesday with episode 20, which is going to be a waiver wire episode. If you haven't seen my waiver wire articles yet, they're a little bit unique. They are going to offer players that you should claim off of waivers, but they usually offer players that you should consider adding to your roster after waivers run. Not using priority, not using fab money, but picking them up for free after waivers run. So I'll be back on Tuesday with that episode 20, talking about which waivers and which guys to pick up after waivers. Until then, as always, please, please, please take 69 very nice seconds to like, subscribe, rate, and review the show. I know you hear it all the time and it probably goes over your head, but that stuff is way bigger than you might imagine, and it is super helpful for me as I chase a childhood dream. So please, if you can take that 69 seconds, it's huge for me. Please do. All right, until next time, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again for helping a guy. You're genuinely helping me chase a childhood dream, and I can't thank you enough for that. It is 3:17 a.m. I'm clocking out. I'm getting ready to go to bed, take tomorrow off, get ramped up, get ready for week 9. I hope you have an awesome, awesome, awesome week 9. Hope if you have 8-0 teams, they're going to be 9-0 teams. And more than that, I hope you as a human have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again on Tuesday. Cheers. This brew's for you.